Every time I go on stage and Olaf introduces me, I ask him one thing. Do not raise the bar. Do not make me look like someone who's going to do the most incredible talk ever. And he always does it. And then, yeah. All right, software craftsmanship in the era of software revolution. Actually, I was talking to some people yesterday, and they were asking me like, "Hey, you typically don't do talks like this. Like, what is it? It's not about Liferay. It's not about OSGI. It's not about modularity. How in the world you come up with a craftsmanship thing?" We'll get to that point. But first, let's think about what we do. We build software. And most of us do what we call an enterprise software. So when we say the word software, we kind of instinctively put it in the context of an enterprise software, which is kind of set to, because there's a lot of different software out there. So a lot of the things that you hear me saying today will actually reflect enterprise software, not any kind of software that you can imagine. And I bet most of you would agree that what we do is actually creative. It's a creative work. You agree? All right. So let's talk about creativity, and hopefully this is going to work. So there are three aspects of human creativity. That's arts, crafts, and science. Okay, I know you're already wondering where's software. I've been wondering that for a very long time. But let's see what those are. Arts is based on intuitive sensing, on vision, and expression. So you do stuff that is supposed to attract other people's senses. They need to like it, so therefore it needs to be pretty, or it needs to be touching, or that's the whole art thing. Then you have crafts. And crafts is basically a sophisticated technique. And I would argue the main difference between arts and crafts is that when you do crafts, you repeat the things that you do over time. If you paint a painting, painting the same painting again or a very similar painting again, it's not going to give you the same result. But if you build things, if you're, I don't know, a blacksmith or whatever crafts you get from the past, you repeatedly build the same things. You improve over time. You build better things. But conceptually, you're still in your craft. You're still doing your own thing with applying potentially better techniques to do that. Now, science is a whole different story. Science relies on knowledge. And this is basically where you go through, learn things, and then you reason about things, and then you figure out things. It doesn't really have a lot in common with arts and crafts, even though there is creativity involved in that process too, obviously. Okay, so software. What it is? How do you think? I'll tell you what I think, and feel free to don't agree with me, but that's just my theory. I think software started as a science, but that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago when we were figuring out how to do things, when that was Alan Turing's time. That was time when, in order to do something, you actually had to be proficient in math on very high level. That was years ago. And by the way, what you see in the picture is ENIAC, the first computer, one of the first computers. And at that time, we didn't even have the concept of software. We were programming machines physically. You had to go and switch things on hardware to actually make the machine do something else. The notion of software wasn't even there. Some people even argue that the first time the word software occurred was actually referring to people, or in other words, anything that's not hardware. Right, because you needed the machine wasn't enough. You also needed a few other things around it to actually make it work. So that's where the word software actually comes from. Everything else but hardware, including people. Now, I think at some point in time, this shifted into a craft. So we already invented the things that allowed us to actually start doing things. So we start coding, we start reusing, we had algorithms, we have programming languages, we have all the tools in place to actually become a craftsman, to actually start, apply techniques to build continuously better and better products. So where it goes from that part, it goes to guilds. Then when you have a craftsmanship, a single person that's doing something, they can only do so much. So what you've historically seen that at some point in time, these people come to get together, they start sharing experience, they learn from each other, they basically use that to improve their skills to become a better at what they do. I would argue we are roughly at that stage as far as software is concerned. And some people will argue we one step further, and I hear that a lot. A lot of people will claim that we do have a software industry. Now, I think we're somewhere in between, because an industry is concerned about productivity, essentially. That's what it is. I mean, I don't really like that word, because literally productivity means how many products you can get out of the product line in a particular period of time, and that's definitely not what we do in software. But essentially, when you have an industry, you're already concerned with things like KPIs, like time to market and all those things. And I know you will say that's what your customers are saying. So yes, we do have an industry. At the same time, though, we do have some people that are fighting for the art, the craft of creating software. That regardless, where we are, that's not really that much important. Important part is where we're going. Where are we going from here? And this is where we're going, with disruptive innovation. Now, some of you may argue that has happened already, but not to the point where it actually affects, or maybe not affects, but threatens people. Right? Well, for now, disruptive innovation has been so far just providing people a few more options, and they're quite happy with that. That's about to change. Software is about to start changing people's life for real. And that's one thing we should be watching. Next talk, Jorge will be talking about machine learning. If you think about cognitive computing in general, you may actually think where we're going from here, because right now we're concerned with like enterprise softwares, and honestly, most of the time deal with half-solved problems. But there is a whole new era of software that is coming, that we can see coming, and that's going to change a lot. Give you an example. Outside, I believe it's Mimicom, one of our sponsors. They have the virtual reality glasses. How many of you have tried that? Okay, few people. Now think about yourself. That's software. Can you build an application for virtual reality like today? How many of you think they can? 0. That's what I expected. Not that I'm saying that virtual reality is going to be tomorrow and everyone is going to be doing it, but it's already there. You can experience it. And yet, not a single person in this room, although we are all developers, is able to program that thing, to create a hello world in virtual reality. But that thing is coming. Which brings me to the next point. Technology. What is technology? Okay, you can search for some explanation. It's a combination of 2 Greek words, and it's basically a collection of arts and crafts in a particular area. So, that's okay, that's a definition. And that puts us into a situation where we are like explaining to ourselves, oh, this is this technology and this is that technology, and we take things for given. which puts us in another bias, which is known as conformity. So basically, when everyone around you accepts a fact, you're kind of forced to accept the same fact whether you want it or not. And even though you may think you're resistant to that, trust me, you're not. I was experiencing that myself a couple of weeks ago, Frankfurt Airport. There's the stairs that you go down to the baggage claim, and next to it is like are the moving stairs, and they are like in two parts. So the stairs, there's a flat thing, and then another stairs. So everyone is going on the moving stairs until the middle, and then they move and they go and walk on the regular stairs. And I did the same thing. Like the whole crowd is doing that thing. Until a person behind me actually went down to the moving stairs. It turns out they work. It turns out there's nothing wrong with using them. But because everyone else is doing the curve, you just blindly follow the crowd. You don't even think about it. It doesn't even occur to your mind that you, as an individual, can do something else than the crowd does. Why is that important? Because this is something that highly affects how we build things. Everyone is doing microservices. We need to know about that thing. Everyone wants Docker. We want to do Docker. That's how we're driven. That's conformity. We had this discussion about Docker yesterday and Liferay, and I was like, okay, give me one reason that you benefit from Docker. And, well, there were some valid reasons, but basically what most people said was, well, because everything else they do is on Docker, so they just want Liferay on Docker. So, it's conformity. We want to have the same approach. That's one of my favorite quotes from Seth Godin, which is, it can either fit in or stand out, but not both. And think about that every time you are about to you're about to make a decision. I'll give you another definition of technology by Alan Kay, and he basically says technology is anything invented after you were born. Now I like that one better. And if you think about it, if you ask me whether a phone, I'm not saying a smartphone, I'm saying a phone as a device that you use to make a phone calls, if that's technology, for me it never was. When I was born, the phones were already there. We already had one at the house. So it was just a thing that does particular thing. I never thought of a phone as a technology. Now, smartphone, it's a technology, right? Because it's wow. It's like I saw it, like how it appeared, the first mobile phones and then smartphones and things like that. For my son, smartphone is not a technology, it's his toy. It's the most obvious thing on earth. You take his smartphone away, he's like, wow, mad. And he doesn't even understand the cost, the value, and all these things. It's just a thing that existed when he was born. That is a very important notion. How we think about the world and everything that surrounds us. A couple of years ago, I attended a conference where Ted Neward was giving one of his famous talks called Iconoclasm. And that's where I learned that word. I didn't even know what that word means before that conference. If you don't know what it is, it's exactly the opposite. Historically and literally, it means a person who destroys icons or religious symbols. But brought in more of a today's world, it's basically everyone who does what everyone says it's impossible. And so Ted was arguing that if you want to survive in this industry, you need to be an iconoclast. You need to think out of the box, and you need to see the world differently. In fact, he defines 3 major characteristics, should I put it that way, of iconoclasm. The first thing is you have to see the world differently. The second thing is you have to be not afraid to speak out. And the third thing is you got to get everyone around you to agree. And that's the hardest part. Because it's no good if you see the world different and you shout about it and then no one around you cares about that. So being an iconoclast is kind of hard, but it's, as he argues, one and only way for us to survive in this industry, let's call it an industry, for a long time. He gave an example of John Henry. If you're not American, you may never heard of John Henry, also called the Steel Driving Man. The story goes, and there are people arguing whether that's a true story or not, but the story goes when he was actually working at the building the rails in the US a long time ago, and at some point in time they invented the steam-powered Hummer. So the steam-powered Hummer was to replace him. And he was like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm challenging the steam-powered Hummer that I can do better. In a given period of time, I can do more work than the machine. And they set up a challenge, and whatever time it take, and he won. He won the challenge, and then he died. Well, you can try that, you can fight, but some things will happen, whether you like them or not. Latitudes, ever heard of them? Industrial Revolution? Those are the people destroying machines after the Industrial Revolution happened because they believe machines are bad and taking their jobs. And we do have some disturbing technologies that a lot of people right now realize will be taking jobs away. That may not be our jobs as developers. So we developers may not go and destroy server rooms, but we as developers kind of sense something's going on. So what we try to do is act like upfront and say, no, you know what, that's not, we're not going to let that be an industry. That's actually a craftsmanship. So we are craftsmen. We have this responsibility, we have our craft and so forth. And some people got together and put the Craftsmanship Manifesto. Now, Craftsmanship Manifesto is kind of continuation of the Agile Manifesto, which you're probably familiar with. And it states a little more things. And the first one is obviously not only working software, but well-crafted software. And if you're a software developer, you would say that's, of course, right? Everyone wants a well-crafted software, so it's obvious. So what's wrong with that? Dan North wrote an article about it, and he basically called us a romantics with big egos. And when I read that article, I was like, what does he mean? That's kind of weird. When you look into that in details, so romantics, it's typically relating or involving love. And if you think of us developers, what we do, we fall in love with the things that we build. That's my library. My project. I'm so excited. It's so great. And I use what is it? Functional programming. Oh my God, it's so exciting. We fall in love with things. And on the other hand, we have big egos. We tend to think that only we can do things that no one else can do. I mean, come on, we automated half of the industries in the world. Right? We do that, and no one else could. Our machines do that. That's all about control. We feel the power. Do you feel the power? Yeah, you as a developer now, you have a power. Because, every single device, hell, your microwave oven is using software. Someone, maybe not in this room, but some software developer wrote it. So we now have the power. And the power is about control. We like when we control things, and we get so excited about it. Except when you think about this scene from a famous movie where they talk about control, and for those of you that don't remember, it goes, the counselor goes, I still feel connected to the machine. They kind of still control us. And Neo goes, well, no, that's not the case. And then the counselor goes, oh, so, well, what is control? And he goes, well, we control the machine because we can choose to shut them down at any time when we wish. So we do control them. And the counselor goes, yeah, of course, you nail it. That's it. Except then we need to think about our air and our water and our electricity and millions of other things those machines control. Now, there's another important thing in that scene is when he says, points at the machine and says, I have no idea how that machine works. I have no idea what's inside. But what I know what it is for. I know it's needed in order for these things to happen. And this is the clue. This is why we do software, for things to happen. No one cares what's inside. No one but you who wrote it and your coworker who may maintain it. No one else cares. How beautiful it is. Whether you use functional programming or whether it's on Docker or whether it's microservices, no one cares. But we still say we write software. Let me think about that for a second. What do we mean by saying we write software? The act of writing is actually producing or executing something by setting down words and figures. And when we say we write software, we actually refer to the physical activity that we do. We sit, we punch the keyboard, and we write things. And we find that so valuable that we say that we write software. Okay, not everyone says that. Some people say that we build software. I believe that's strongly related to our building tools, but still building, it's a little bit closer. It means to construct or assemble or join parts, but that's not the only thing we do. I suggest that we should say that we are actually making software. Because making software means we are bringing into existence by shaping or changing materials and combining parts and potentially writing things or potentially building things or potentially doing a bunch of other things. That's what we do. We are bringing things to existence by combining all of the tools that we around us. Another thing that comes from craftsmanship movement is the MVP. Do you know what it is? No one? Oh, wow. It's a minimal valuable product. So basically what they teach you if you sign up to be a craftsmanship or you go to one of those conferences, they're going to tell you that what you need to build is a minimal valuable product. Then you give it to your customer, get your feedback, and then you evolve it from there. And that's a beautiful theory. And I highly agree with that as long as it's a theory. Because what does it mean, a minimal valuable product? If, let's say you want to build a new CMS or a new CRM or a new ERP software, what's your minimal valuable product? Considering there are 50 or 500 of those on the market already. You have to beat those guys, otherwise you have no minimal valuable product. There's no way you can say, oh, here it is, I have this thing that I can save customers' notes, and that's my minimal valuable product. No, you have to build a whole lot of stuff before you can actually consider showing that to anyone. So, how do you do that? You do that by reusing what's around you. You grab pieces from there, you grab pieces from there, and you compose them. Well, and if you think in software terms, that's probably Maven and Download the World. You heard that this morning by Peter. And that's actually another interesting thing, which goes back to the control. We are very sensitive about who controls what, right? So let me give you an example. You can just throw a bunch of dependencies inside your application and happily use them, as long as you control them, because they are inside your application, and you are the application, so you control the stuff, right? But when you have to put your application into an application server, that's bad, because application server now controls you. You've been controlled by something that someone else wrote, so that's bad. So what we do, we got the application server and put it inside the application, so now we can control the stupid thing. And the whole thing goes around with the MVP, like what do we reuse and how do we reuse things. So there are a lot of things that you can use to achieve that, minimum valuable product there. So there's a lot of things that you can use to achieve your goal. Why you don't always use it, and why a lot of people argue that you should sit down and write your application from scratch, using as less as possible. 2 reasons. The first one is because we love what we build. It's our baby, right? And then that implies responsibility, that implies better applications. Well, maybe. But it takes time. The other thing is, how reusable are all those things around you? If you were to grab the whole Oracle database and embed it in your application, say, no way, I'm not doing that. And that's because it was not meant to do this thing, right? But sometimes you grab a whole library just because you want to use 3 classes or 3 methods out of it, and that's totally okay. That's trust, and that's sometimes a fact that you're actually not aware of what's going on. So in order for this to work in a perfect world, everything that surrounds you needs to be prepared to be reused in different situations. So imagine the world where every single piece of software was built in such a way that you could actually grab bits and pieces and easily connect them together into producing something that's even more valuable. Wait a minute, someone today was talking about biology and space and how those things work. We've seen those patterns, except in our software space, this is not the case because everyone is so concerned about their little baby, and craftsmanship goes as far as the internals of the little baby are concerned. How beautifully we designed the internals of our tiny little piece that no one cares about, because everyone cares about the external and how they actually interoperate with the outside world. So I'd say, when you think about craftsmanship, when you think about building software, you design for predictability. Predictability is what you want to achieve. Obviously, you cannot predict everything. But if your minimal valuable product is able to say, I know sometime from now things will change, and I will be prepared for that in one way or another, that's your minimal valuable product. And it doesn't, and obviously, you can reuse things that also take that into account. I was struggling with how to put this until I read an article by Gregory Hope, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, and that's not him on the picture. This guy, forgot his name, Tiris or something like that, was born in Greece, long time ago. And I'll go back to him in a second. But Gregory Hope wrote an article selling options. He was a lead architect for Allianz. And what he says is his job is to sell options. Now, for those of you who are not in financial markets, like me, have no idea what selling options mean, is basically selling the option to or buy or sell something in the future at known cost or at known price. And okay, I still don't get that because I still don't deal with financial, long enough. So I searched for, go back. I spoiled my final note. Okay, anyway, so I searched in the internet, and what is it selling options? There's an example by this guy in Greece who actually did a smart thing. He did some math or whatever, astronomy, whatever he did, and he figured out that the next year there is a high chance of a big growth of olives in the region. So what he did is he went to everyone who had an oil press and made an agreement with them that next year at that time he's going to borrow the press, all the presses in the area at given price. And he paid for that option. So I'm giving you money today, and the agreement is next year when I come to you and want to borrow the press, you're going to borrow it for me at that price. That's what selling options is. So when he turned right, and the next year olives were all over the place, he went and rented all these presses. He was the only person in the area owning the olive press. So he made a lot of money out of that. But just because he was able to predict that something may happen, and he had reserved himself the option to react properly when that thing happens. So that's what selling option is. And that is what you should aim at your applications. You should build applications in a way that provides you with the right, not the obligation, but the right to actually execute your options when you need to. So that's my final slide. Modularity should be your favorite craftsmanship technique because it buys you options. Thank you.